Yeah, it's not going forward. I can just do, I mean, I can come over here and advance it too. Oh yeah.
I think I just had to click on that screen.
Oh, okay. Alrighty, sounds good. Yeah, do you think I mean, I guess we do have quite a, I can hold it. All right. Everyone hear me? All right. We're going to get started. Since we got a good turnout today, it's going to take a little while to go around and do introductions. So first of all, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming out for our first section meeting of 2025 at one of our favorite venues and most well-attended venues. I know I love coming to Jack's, and also I know this is one of my favorite meetings of the year just because I enjoy seeing the cool projects that win our Transportation Achievement Award. So and I also wanted to give a special thanks to Stonebrook Engineering for sponsoring our January meeting here. Before I get into a few announcements and we get into our presentation, we'll go around the room and do introductions. So I know we had been doing the Menti meeting last year for our question of the day, which worked well, I thought. But for today, I'm going to mix it up and go a little old school and just do a traditional question of the day. So we'll go around and do your name and employer, your current role in NCITE, if you do have one, and then the question for today. Other than Jack's, what is your favorite spot for breakfast or brunch? And it doesn't have to be local here; it can be wherever. So I will start. I'm Nick Costello. I'm this year's NCITE president. Washington County / Metro Transit Gold Line Project Office. My favorite spot is no longer open, or I should say my favorite spot was Ward 6 on the east side of St. Paul, if any of you know that place. That was my favorite spot, which closed about 5 years ago. And now my daughters only want to go to Colossal Cafe. So I guess that'll be my answer for today. Maybe we can start over here.
The area, so I haven't tried a ton of breakfast spots. I've been a real fan of living in the house. Coffee as well.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Hogan. I work with Brandon. I do not have any roles with NCITE, but my favorite spot would be everyone. Hey, Bobby with County. My favorite breakfast spot at Philip Alley. Cafe. Joe Gustafson, Washington County, past president. And most Sundays I can be gone. Southwest. Breakfast spot in Cross with the line. President 20. Favorite breakfast spot.
Justin Stevens, SRF, was your secretary. I would have to say.
Kendall Bennett. Probably be something.
Zach Raven, Washington County. I'd have to say. Justin Alliance.
I've seen it TC2. My favorite breakfast spot is cafe. And let's go SRF and Sulphur. Joseph's.
Zach, with SRF. I don't know if he's got anything come up with that.
Tim Arvidson's from Brick Engineering. I have to say, Wampat.
Big Cabot, City of Chaska. I'm a letting you. My favorite breakfast spot. I would say the measure of my favorite breakfast spot. Zach Lane, HDR Engineering, favorite breakfast spot at the Nighthawk.
Phil Coolest, this year's past president, so he's my that's. And favorite breakfast spot would be Good Day Cafe.
Jake Bongard, Bolton and Mike, and I'm gonna have to double up to.
Everyone, Jack Wilson, Kimmy Horn. This is Grant from Spotted. I like buttered fit and thick ball. Jar, Big Cafe.
Kelly.
Perfect. And two places. Valley.
Probably with SRF, and there's this little diner.
I was going to say breakfast sandwich after McDonald's after. We did talk about that.
$5 at the county.
This one is from the county park kitchen.
Finkelstein, Street Logic Pro, a little donut spot called So Yen in town.
Sad line. I'm sorry, did you start building? First with line engineering. And probably go with Magnolias. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's.
Hi everyone, Julian Kia from SRF Consulting. Fairly new to the Twin Cities, so I'll just go with one of my favorite.
Tom Cantor, please. I know it's completely in my spots, Trophy Cafe.
Powers with KLJ. I like the Egg and I because they always get my day.
Prior KLJ engineering, Desperate Nostalgia.
And Clark, as her app, I'll say St. Paul.
All right. Thank you, everyone. So just a couple announcements before we get into the actual presentation. I wanted to just show up here. So we announced this at the annual meeting, but I just wanted to show our executive board for 2025. It's myself, Joe DeVore, Justin Siebens, Sarah Peterson, Caitlin and AJ as directors, and Morgan Nelson as our Great Lakes representative. Phil, I noticed I actually did not include you on here as past president. So speaking of the senior slide, you've been forgotten. But I just wanted to say we're here to serve you guys as members of the organization. So if you have suggestions or ideas on how we can improve the organization or better serve you, please reach out to any of us. And speaking of improving the organization, so as a board, we've talked about a few initiatives for 2025. One is increasing public sector participation, specifically at section meetings like this and at the annual meeting. We've noticed in the past few years, numbers have been down from some public organizations, MnDOT and some others. So we're going to be working to improve that this year. We actually have a meeting set up for late January with some leadership at MnDOT to talk about how we can improve that. Increasing student participation. We're going to be talking with our student outreach coordinators, talking about how we can get some increased participation from our student chapters. And then lastly, website revamp. So I know most of you probably know our website needs some updating in terms of just information on there, but it's kind of clunky, a little out of date. So we're going to be looking at options for revamping that and just making that a little bit more user friendly. Committee updates. So I don't have any actual upcoming committee meetings on here, but I just want to mention that there's a couple of vacant positions currently. So the Geometric Design Committee is looking for a co-chair, and then we are also looking for an advertising coordinator. So if you or maybe someone you know might be a good fit for one of these positions, please let any of us on the board know. It would be a good opportunity to get involved with the organization. And then upcoming NCITE events. So we're working on, for our February section meeting, we're working on a meeting in mid-February. It's going to be a presentation from Connie Sahibjam at MnDOT, the Metro District Engineer, kind of a 2025 update for Metro District, talking about program numbers, a few of the major projects, some challenges, legislature, stuff like that. We don't have an exact date and location for that yet, but it's likely going to be either the week of February 10th or the week of the 17th. And it will likely be a lunchtime meeting over either at Water's Edge or nearby. So look for something hopefully next week for a save the date for that one. And then in terms of other stuff coming up just the rest of the year, we're looking at planning 5 additional section meetings beyond February. So it will be March, April, and May, and then September and October. And then we are also actively working on planning our 2nd annual golf event this year. So more to come on that. That one will likely be in the kind of the late July, early August timeframe. And then Morgan's not here today, but she just wanted me to show this and mention a few things. So Great Lake ITE annual meeting is in Great Lakes ITE district annual meeting is in Indianapolis this year, June 8th through the 10th. And that is a joint meeting with the WTS Central Region. So hoping to see some of you there. I'm certainly planning on going, and I know several other board members are as well. Morgan just wanted me to mention that, so registration will open for that in April, but sponsorships will be available in the next 2 weeks. So hope to see you there. And I think that is it for announcements. I will turn it over to Caitlin to introduce today's speakers. Thank you, everyone.
We'll see if I can juggle. All right. Nate Cabot is the Community Development Director for the City of Chaska. He has worked for the city for 9 years. Nate holds a master's degree in urban and regional planning from the University of Iowa and is AICP certified. Nate enjoys ice cream and tossing the tennis ball when his dog actually cooperates in a game of fetch. Bob Moyer is a senior project engineer at Bolton and Mank. He has worked at Bolton and Mank for 4 years. His career is founded in multifaceted, complex construction projects, but has lately been managing projects through design and construction all over the metro area. Bob enjoys long books, long trails, and short lines at coffee shops. Jake Bongard is a principal transportation engineer with Bolton and Mank. He began his career in 2009 and works on a variety of projects ranging from high-level planning studies to in-depth final design. Jake holds a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of North Dakota. Jake enjoys building forts with his kids and taking annual trips to the Boundary Waters. Great, if you guys want to come up, you can take it away. This mic's for the Teams meeting and this mic for
choice. This is Teams, this is the room. Oh, I'm doing both. Yep. Okay, is this working? Okay, so I'm Nate Cabot. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Chaska. And I'll get us kicked off. Just a little preview here. Soon after I'm done talking, I'm gonna have to leave because I have another commitment. So it's me, not you. Don't feel like I'm trying to run away. So yeah, first off, I just want to thank you for the award. This is a project that I've been working on actually for almost my entire career at this point. Starting out at the city at Carver County as a planner, I actually wrote the RFP that brought these guys on board to do the planning project on the planning side of this project. That was almost 10 years ago. And then I navigated and was touching this project regardless of who I seemed to be working for or what role I was holding, either working for Carver County or City of Chaska, and now the Community Development Director there. So we've got Jake here, we've got Bob. Thanks to both of them for inviting me to help share Chaska's story. Let me get started. Clicker. Yeah. This is the future.
We're here.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So just to preview some of the things that we're going to be discussing today, we'll go through the history of this project, the city's role and leadership, some issues and problems, solutions. Bob has trained me through this project that for every problem there is a solution. We can be confident in that. We'll go through the funding, construction, and project accomplishments. I'll be here for the first section, and then I'll toss it over to these guys. So just kind of get you oriented to Chaska a little bit. There's quite a bit of history in the city. I don't know if you've ever been there before, but if you have, you would know that we have a pretty historic downtown. You can kind of follow transportation history and kind of how that's developed along the Minnesota River. Chaska was once a stop on the Minnesota River, sort of serving as a port for grain primarily and other materials that need to happen. We're sort of a frontier outpost at that point, right? Carver County was organized in 1855. First railroad bridge over the Minnesota was in St. Peter in 1869. St. Peter's a little bit south of Chaska. City of Chaska was incorporated in 1891. And then you can see here, there's some photos of 41 and how that has looked differently over the years. In the original plat for Chaska, 41 would have been Chestnut Street. There would have been no river crossing at that point in time, and it would have been a city street, right? And so that city street over time has become MnDOT State Highway with a river crossing, which is a critical route in the connections that it serves, north-south, between Scott County and Carver County, really. So here you see the location of Chaska as it pertains to the metro. Yellow dot is showing where that is. You can see the crossing of 41 connects 169 up to 212 and Trunk Highway 5 and ultimately Trunk Highway 7. And here, in Chaska, we talk about the 3 Gs that travel on Highway 41 frequently: grain, garbage, and gravel. And so on the south side of the river, you've got a DEMCON site where there's a lot of garbage that's going there. You've also got gravel mines that are on the south side of the river that are coming northward to feed all the development that's going on. And then you've got the grain that's trying to access from farm locations in western Carver County and beyond over to the ports in Shakopee, where they thereby go to the world, right? So you can see in Chaska, this is zoomed in to our downtown. You get the historic kind of traditional grid street system that was developed with the original plat. You've got 41 that goes through the heart of downtown, which was, really originally the main street of Chaska. So you can begin to see some of that tension, right? MnDOT's got interest in getting vehicles through quickly and efficiently. We want people to come and get out of their cars and walk around and enjoy our downtown. And so you've got that kind of interesting dichotomy there. Downtown Chaska, and this I think influences a lot of this project as well, the historic nature of it. We have a National Historic District in downtown Chaska. It's one of our 2 major commercial districts. There's many locally and nationally designated historic buildings in Chaska, some of them lining the project site, which made Bob's job more fun. We also have native burial site in Chaska. So right in the heart of our downtown is our traditional city square. It's got the gazebo smack dab in the middle, and it's got pathways going to it, and it's kind of that holiday card experience when it snows out. But that's right off of 41. There's 3 burial mounds in that site, so it is by state statute a cemetery. And then on top of that, now we've built what we would call our historic park or city square. So there's all that kind of layering that's going on in downtown. Downtown Chaska overview, I've given you a little bit of that, I guess, already. I think some things to note, in addition to what I've mentioned, in 2012, there was a downtown master plan that was done. So downtown Chaska built around the brick industry. There's a lot of bricks actually in downtown Minneapolis, and also the State Capitol's foundation is built out of Chaska brick. And so that was clay that got mined out of Chaska. It was very industrial. Eventually that brick industry dried up. And so, over the last few decades, right, we've been working on revamping and rebuilding and redeveloping and all that kind of thing. And what is that vision? And there's a lot of scattered kind of work going on, and I think in the right direction. But come 2012, people thought, you know what, maybe we better be a little bit more coordinated about this. So there was work that went into that, come up with a downtown master plan, identified some key investment areas and things that we wanted to see happen. And 41, with the spine of downtown, was definitely identified in that plan. Trunk Highway 41 at the time, before this construction project happened, was 2 lanes going each way. no dedicated turn lanes. There's a lot of traffic kind of hazards that came out of that. Not great experience for pedestrians. And so we recognize that, Chaska needs to really take a lead here, put a priority on improvements to Highway 41, because everything kind of radiates out from that. So that was the 2012 Downtown Master Plan. In 2014, we initiated planning for the corridor. So that Carver County, MnDOT, City of Chaska all came together and started talking about what should this be. It was really driven by MnDOT identifying the corridor for a mill and overlay. And then Chaska coming in and saying, well, that doesn't really align with our downtown master plan. We need something more than that. So then talking about how are we going to get there? So goals and perspectives. This is coming out of that downtown master plan and also some of the planning work that was done at the onset, led by Bolton and Menk, to preserve and enrich the ambiance of historic downtown Chaska, provide a comprehensive network of non-motorized transportation, safely accommodate all users, so not just the traffic, but also the pedestrians. Provide efficient and reliable vehicle mobility, so that's getting at the need for actually dedicated turn lanes. Provide infrastructure improvements compatible with natural and human environment. Again, that's getting back towards, can we make this more pedestrian friendly? And develop a financially responsible implementation plan, which gets at how do we get other people to pay for it with grant dollars. So you can see this is kind of some public input and summarizing out, a Mentimeter exercise that was done at the onset, and some of those keywords that were coming out from the community is what they wanted to see. So city leadership, I think it is fair to say that the city of Chaska did take a a very strong leadership role in this, definitely with the partnership of Carver County and MnDOT at our side. But I think, to credit to those folks, recognizing that the goals that were at hand here are really driven by the city and the local experience and what we're wanting to see with their downtown. So allowing the locals to drive that vision and that implementation, I think was a benefit to the project. So the city really took the lead on the planning effort with Bolton and Menk, really doing a lot of the legwork through that. You see Nicole up there. She was with Bolton and Menk, one of the communication specialists there at a public event that we held, and she was very engaged in the project along with a lot of people. But really kind of moving together through the process. I won't say it was always easy. There were some very contentious meetings that occurred as we're trying to align the various purposes, right, of a city versus MnDOT and the county in between. Everyone's got their own goals and strategies and needs that need to be met. But we were able to work through that. And then even through implementation, and Bob's going to get into some of that, having the city at the lead of that with MnDOT and Carver County as partners, I think went a long way in being, a little bit more boots on the ground and understanding those connections to the business community and the local residents that were going to be impacted through this thing and how to best approach them and be able to anticipate, likely scenarios. So I was talking a bit about the partnerships. I think, it's important to thank the folks that were involved in this project, provided leadership, and, first and foremost, the Chaska Mayor and City Council for setting the vision and staying strong in the face of scrutiny of the project, and, during the project to support the business community. When we were trying to sell the idea that we're going to take, 2 lanes in each direction and turn it into 1 through lane in each direction, that blew a lot of people's minds who live in Chaska, right? Who are transversing this corridor every day and going, how in the world are you going to get traffic that needs 2 lanes in each direction today and smush that into 1? Lo and behold, I think it's worked out pretty well, but it's a mental exercise, right? So there's a lot of scrutiny that comes through that. And to the city council's credit, they held strong to that vision. MnDOT for engaging in the process. I think that deserves a lot of recognition, allowing for that conversation to happen and take what should have been or what they thought would be a mill and overlay and turn that into a complete redesign of a state highway through a downtown. Carver County for being involved in the preliminary design, also a huge funding partner in the project. Bolton and Menk for leading the design, the public engagement, and the environmental and archaeological documentation for the project and implementation, fostering that construction project through, right, and trying to minimize impacts to the business community. Stantec did a lot of design work on utilities, stormwater, and parking elements. HKGI did a lot of design work on the ultimate streetscaping and placemaking and helping those goals around pedestrian friendliness happen. Braun Intertech did a lot of work on the geotech and contaminated soil services that are in there. So think about that past, right? The brick making industry, there's a whole lot of contamination that came out of that. And then Passion Messner, the right-of-way acquisition for this project, I don't remember how many different properties and acquisitions happen. I don't know if you guys know that number, but it's mind-boggling. So little, everything from little slivers of a few inches because you've got building faces coming up to the right-of-way, and this was all done back in 1860, when it was originally platted, and so things don't quite match up. So trying to get all that right-sized to meet this project, that was a very complicated process, and Passion Messner did a lot of work to make that successful. What else you got for me, Jake? Okay, so Chaska's community development. I think a couple things that tie into this and just kind of continue to build that perspective for you all. And this is out of that downtown master plan, a few things that the city has seen as priorities, and we've been executing along with this, but it feeds into 41. If you ever come to Chaska, you might want to go to Fireman's Park. That's kind of our cornerstone park in downtown. We've got a curling center that's part of that, and an event center that's part of that. It's a pretty happening place. There's a lot of people that go there to enjoy the park, but also engage in the curling and visit the event center and the restaurant that's there. That was one of the ideas that came out of that master planning process, trying to create a regional draw for downtown and an anchor to downtown. So there was that. This is where our city square is located. And then we've got another project that we're pursuing called City Square West. That's because it's the square that's west of City Square, and that's how creative we get with naming things. But that's a block that we're looking to redevelop and hopefully bring some more kind of multifamily mixed use type development, connect pedestrian walkways that go through the mid block of Chaska. And that's a Paseo network that we call it. I think Jake or Bob is probably going to get into that more. That's one that I could talk about all day. But this is all kind of surrounding that spine of 41. And our objective is to really reinvigorate downtown Chaska and bring vibrancy and bring that desire to want to live there and work there and do all the things that people want to do, right? So this project then kind of sets that spine, like I've been saying, for all of that. And I think now we have a video. So I just press play. Is that how you say it? So this is about a 7-minute video that kind of provides a summary of the project. You'll see some interviews that are going on with our mayor, our city administrator, some of the key folks at MnDOT and Carver County. I think Bolton and Menk gets presence in it too, I'm guessing. But you'll see them kind of talking about that process that led up to the project and also through implementation and the experience that went with that.
All right. So I had the pleasure of really starting on this project all the way from the study phase at the very, very beginning, closing in on 10 years ago now, and helping to kind of foster it through preliminary and final design. But I think the since retired city engineer put it perfectly. I think his goal at the beginning was to make sure everybody was equally unhappy with what the result was. And I think he said that just in the fact that he knew the complications here, he knew the tight right of way, and he knew how complicated it would be to find something that works for everybody. And I think at the core, the thing to remember here, this is a downtown. As the mayor said, it's their main street. And with that comes a responsibility to provide local movement, safety, but also provide that regional connectivity that's needed here. So breaking this down to a few different buckets, starting with that mobility piece. So downtown Chaska, Highway 41, pushes through about 18 and 19,000 vehicles per day through a main street, through a city, through a downtown corridor. With that comes about 2,200 trucks per day, so about 12% trucks rolling through the corridor, and that's stemmed back to the 3 Gs that Nate mentioned with the garbage, the gravel, and the grains. And it is also principal arterial, and it's on the MnDOT freight network as well. From a crash perspective, there were a lot of issues before the project happened. The corridor averaged 21 crashes per year. That's about 80% higher than the statewide average for what you'd see on a typical corridor. And if you look at the typical section here, it's the standard 4-lane, divided, undivided, no turn lanes, no left or right turn lanes. So I am a Chaska resident. I worked in Burnsville for years, so I drove this corridor every day. And there was kind of a game as you drove through of kind of how quickly you could get through the corridor. The inside lane was always a little bit quicker, but you knew if there was one left turner that came and stopped in that inside lane, it just stopped traffic in that lane. So everybody kind of slingshotted around in the outside lane, and it was just a big hodgepodge of weaving and merging and people just trying to get through the corridor. So speeds were high with people trying to navigate the corridor as quickly as they can. And crashes were there too. So on average, it was about 5 or 6 right angle crashes a year, 4 left turn crashes, and a handful of side swipes as well. The typical section that you see here with the center median, and then on the southern side of it, there's 2nd Street intersection, there's a traffic signal. So unfortunately, there was a pedestrian fatality along the corridor in 2008. And from that stemmed a MnDOT project to just make things better as best they could. So they provided these improvements in 2010, but clearly still there has been some issues along the corridor just with all the traffic that's being pushed through and the 4-lane corridor that we have today. So over the recent years, there have been 3 pedestrian and bicycle crashes as well. So there was still an issue that was occurring throughout the corridor. And if you dig in a little bit more of the corridor, it's not hard to see that 41 is a barrier for downtown. The map at right just has a good smattering of what the businesses are, the civic buildings, the parks. You can see they really do fall on both sides of Highway 41. So if you look at pedestrian space, amenities, foot traffic that goes through here, people want to cross the road, people want to get through, but they just don't feel comfortable doing that. Today, or I guess previous to the project being constructed, there's anywhere from 7 to 9 feet of space between the back of curb and the building faces. So that really just left room for concrete, light poles, and street signs. That's it. On-street parking was provided on the east side of the road, which you can see in that picture there, but it was too uncomfortable really to even try to hop out of your car with 12% trucks and 18,000 vehicles per day rumbling through. From pedestrian movements and facilities, the local trips, as I mentioned, they're complicated. So there were 3 traffic signals throughout the corridor that kind of allowed you to press the button and cross if you need to, but there's still that multiple threat concern with the 4 lanes of traffic. The mid-block crossings were difficult too. If you look back here, there's one at 3rd Street. You can see it's barely a 6-foot median. It's not comfortable to stand in, again, with trucks rumbling by. So it just wasn't a great environment for people to get around. Regionally, you can see the dash line here with the arrows. The Minnesota River Bluffs Trail tries to traverse here, or it's going to here soon. There's a nice long trail system in Carver, which is the city to the west. Chanhassen, Eden Prairie to the east also has a nice trail system, and there's a 2-mile gap in between. So locals have been trying to fill that gap, and a project is going to be completed later this year. But again, 41 was just a huge barrier for the regional movements, or I guess the longer range ped bike movements that wanted to occur here. So getting into the solutions, we're able to see a lot of this in the video, but just kind of highlighting some of the details of it. I think one interesting piece of this, from what we know, from what we looked up, this is the first implementation of a road diet on a principal arterial roadway in the Twin Cities Metro. It is a downtown corridor, but we did, as the video showed, and you can see here it barely, but it was converted from a 4-lane to a 2-lane roadway with turn lanes at each intersection. So while we're reducing capacity essentially with 1 lane in each direction instead of 2, just providing good long turn lanes for the left turners and little outlets for the right turns as well, just keeping traffic moving as best we can within this smaller environment. And I think the ped bike improvements are really highlighted by what you see here. And I think it's been made a significant change in downtown. So kind of walking through each components of that, the traffic calming element. And I don't know if you noticed, but when the drone flight was there on the far left side, number 1, there's a goal and an interest to extend downtown or the feel of downtown as far south as you can. You're transitioning from a 50-mile-per-hour rural section essentially into a 30-mile-per-hour urban section in downtown. So how do you start to introduce that as quickly as you can? So adding curb and gutter and kind of an outcropping of rocks just to kind of make it feel a little more uncomfortable in the center median. Not huge rocks or anything, but just something to give a little presence. So you make it feel like you're leaving the rural section. That was implemented. And calming along with just reducing the through lanes was just a big deal. You don't have the people jockeying, trying to race through. You're stuck behind the person in front of you and you navigate it that way. Parking removal is a big thing as well, just with it was a big talking point for the business community. No one likes to lose parking right in front of their business, but it became a priority in reducing it from 4 lanes down to 2. That was a requirement of Met Council to remove parking, just because you couldn't have people slowing to get in a parking spot or backing out of that parking stall if there's only a single lane of traffic. So that became a need as part of the project as well. So really supplementing that with city parking lots, and I'll show some graphics on that too. Pedestrian connections, so yeah, just providing safer crossings. The 6-foot medians were expanded to anywhere from 12 to 15 feet, just to get people just to have a better refuge in the middle. And then the uncontrolled crossing improvements benefited from that as well, along with the reduction of the multiple threat crash, just with the single lane in each direction. Sidewalk and pedestrian space was really doubled throughout. So is that 7 to 9 feet from the back of curb to the building face. It's now anywhere from 15 to 18 feet. So a lot more space to implement planter beds and things like that, just to have a nicer buffer area between all the heavy vehicles driving by on the trunk highway and where people want to walk in front of the businesses. And then implementing an underpass where number 6 is there to help kind of facilitate that regional trail connection. And then on the far right here, 7. So this is that Fireman's Park that Nate had talked about. And I'll show a typical section of that, but it was a very difficult crossing before. So a pedestrian hybrid beacon and center median was installed there just to make it a much safer environment for people to cross from a portion of town into what is the Premier Park in Chaska. So locally, I mentioned the Highway 41 parking being kind of pushed off of the trunk highway. And with that, the city knew that was a big deal to further accommodate that. So they constructed city parking lots as part of this. So general public parking that folks could park in and then still visit the businesses. So with it, they're kind of positioned throughout town. And this is that corridor north-south. So there's a parking lot on the south side, and then one in the middle, and then one on the north side too. And they knew we just couldn't provide parking lots. We had to find a good way to get people to the businesses. So installing paseos or kind of wide decorative walkways that vehicles can't drive on, but pedestrians can use. So it's a good opportunity for businesses to kind of expand their reach outside and just get people from the parking that's provided to each of these businesses. So the goal was to still have public parking within 1 block of each of these businesses at the end of the day. And we knew access would be maybe shifting to the back of the stores in some instances, just where the parking no longer fronts the buildings. So the city even went as far as providing grant funding or providing funding to each of the businesses to really dress up their back doors as well, just to make it more inviting for people to come and access it from these parking lots, to make it as enticing as they possibly could. So just some street view or just some ground shots here. So there's that existing 4-lane undivided section. I procrastinated a little, so I guess you can see the lighting out here that we have in the nighttime shot here, but you can see there's a nice center wide median there. You can see the additional ped space here and how that looks with 1 lane in each direction rather than 2. A little difficult to see, but this is that pedestrian hybrid beacon on the north side of the road. or the north side of the corridor. So the park's on the right here. But you can see how it changed. It was previously just to see a pavement. Nobody crossed there. If someone tried to, cars wouldn't stop for them. So this adds such a greater presence. A nice 2-stage crossing with a 10-foot center median and the pedestrian hybrid beacon. It really changed the way people can access the park. So yeah, all in all, just a good overview here of what the corridor looks like from an aerial view, as well as the underpass that was constructed there as part of that regional trail system, just to help make that connection. So I'll turn it over to Bob here. If you want to hit on funding much or just move right into construction.
Morning, everyone. I'm a construction engineer by trade. I'm kind of graduating into, excuse me, a little bit more these days. My role on the project was kind of, liaison from the construction side. MnDOT was the kind of primary construction administration folks. They did inspection, they did testing. We supplemented testing and inspection for some of the more like city-centric elements, the utilities, kind of like the beautifying pieces. So I kind of liaised between the city and MnDOT and our design folks and all of that stuff. So that was kind of my role on that, as well as kind of providing some, constructability things with my own background and experience as well. And then kind of jumping back in to the presentation on funding. Really, this is just like a multifaceted funding scheme, right? So Nate kind of said that, this is how do we get money to do what we need to do in cooperation with folks, reliably and to align with all of everybody's goals, rather than just one entity, rather than one entity kind of providing more than the other. So it's kind of nice blend of things here. I'm just going to touch on that one quick. In my section here on the construction side is relatively visuals centric. So if you can't see, feel free to get up. We're totally casual here, right? So construction here, I'll talk about like the goals. So when I started on this project, the project was I was called into the administrator's offices and said, Bob, these are our kind of main tenets for construction. We wanted to ensure safety for all during construction. Sounds straightforward. In a downtown area, that's a little bit different. Keep downtown open for business. Chaska in general is very business oriented. So it's caters very hard to the businesses and their needs, kind of from a deliveries perspective for access and keeping businesses open. Anytime you reconstruct a downtown like this, the impacts are enormous. And we had to do that for a long time. And it was really, really hard for businesses. So Chaska kind of backed their businesses up saying, Bob, if you upset these businesses too much, we're going to be upset too. So businesses are a big deal. Maintain traffic through as much as possible. That river bridge that we keep seeing was a kind of a primary issue sometimes, but we kept traffic through there. Limiting truck traffic on 41 during construction. So really we wanted to close that bridge, but only for a certain period of time. We'll get into that a little bit later. But we couldn't allow trucks to come through. So differentiating from a traffic control perspective to allow cars to come through and use the rest of downtown. And I have this graphic on the right that kind of shows what we had to do from a level of detail perspective on where we could and couldn't allow people, and trucks specifically. And we'll see in the staging section that trucks couldn't really make it through. The geometry just wasn't there and the amount of time that we needed to do that. So making that differentiation from a traffic control perspective to allow cars but not trucks was pretty difficult too. And then reopen downtown as pretty much as soon as possible. So it's kind of like the, prodigal, have your cake and eat it too a little bit. And I think we did okay. Construction was pretty difficult, and I'll get into that as well. Just out of curiosity, has anybody been through Chaska since it's been open? Oh, nice. One, couple. Okay, cool. Nice. I'll get back to this graphic a little bit too, just in a little bit more detail so you guys can see it. So I'll talk about some of the construction challenges. Nate mentioned that City Square Park is a burial site, and it is. So that required cultural resource monitoring for a pretty large section of downtown. This is about 2 blocks plus those couple of parking lot areas. So that was a thing. Thinking further about risk and managing that risk, if we ran into something, that kind of puts the whole project on hiatus. But we did all of that. Contaminated materials was another big one. Each of the red areas on here are probable sites. for contamination. The yellows are medium and obviously green is low. So that was a problem. We ran into a lot of stuff. There was an old rail corridor is where the trail is now. So, you know, if you've had any experience about rail corridors, there's a lot of, you know, contamination in there, largely clinker and all of that. But we also had some groundwater issues as well. So there was an old gas station on this Highway 61 and Walnut Street corner. So there's an underground plume there. And then there's a soil plume in 1988 that was groundwater contamination as well. And there was a monitoring well in that location as well. So we had to kind of, you know, figure out how the heck are we going to do this. Groundwater itself was a problem. So this is the Minnesota River itself. During the spring, that's this year, when we had to shut the road down. So this is after construction. This is this year, but this is the kind of thing that can happen. And I want to kind of highlight that levee system that we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, but there is a levee protecting pretty much all of downtown from flooding. And that levee you can kind of see on the left side of the screen, that's kind of like that mound a little bit. And that bridge is obviously connects Shakopee to Chaska. And this is kind of the extent of what can happen. This happens relatively regularly. But this wasn't our issue on the project, but it caused a lot of issues. A little bit further on that levee system, you can see on the top graphic, that red line is kind of an outline of where that levee exists. And I have on that graphic on the bottom that kind of portrays that, you know, the top of that levee, and I have that red line to kind of show about that top elevation of where that is. And if you can see kind of in the background of that photo, you can see our First Street intersection is pretty low down there. Interestingly, Chaska also has like that lake on the north side. So all of that groundwater all goes to the river. And then conversely, that river kind of, you know, comes through the ground as well. Now, when we're doing things like water main, that's 8 feet deep at that First Street intersection, you know, we had to kind of consider what are the ramifications of groundwater in that location. What we did was we did some just kind of wells in there. So temporary wells, kind of off alignment. And we were pumping for about 2.5 weeks groundwater out of there ahead of when we needed to do that. So during water main, it was just dry enough for us to do that, and backfilling with some sand actually worked out pretty well. We had to go really, really fast though, and you'll see that a little bit in the staging section. So groundwater was a huge problem, not to mention, you know, from essentially both directions, right in that little hole where we had to do all of that. All right, Nate also touched on historic buildings. Each of these dots show either currently listed or potentially listed historic buildings. Many of these are over 100 years old with masonry construction. So really, really susceptible to vibration. We had a very extensive vibration monitoring plan. Pretty much for the whole project duration, we increased our number of monitors, we decreased the number of monitors. We did real-time monitoring for some of that stuff. It was a big deal. Anybody ever done this before? Vibration monitoring? Okay, yeah, it was a thing. It's big science, and I learned a lot about this. A lot of practical knowledge learned there. Utilities were also an issue. So anytime you do any construction downtown, there's always utilities. This graphic shows the existing private utilities and proposed project utilities. So not to mention there's the existing and proposed private utilities. So essentially like double all the lines shown on here. And like for some of you who are in the engineering world who do this kind of thing, this all makes sense to you. But like really what I mean is that like when you drive downtown, it all looked very nice, but underground is a mess. It's just like spaghetti down, you know, underneath. So we talk about that a lot. This was one of like our main kind of driving force behind how we had to eventually stage the project. We didn't do quality level A utilities downtown, really because we didn't have time for them to relocate in time for our letting. Furthermore, if we would have relocated in time anyway, they would have had to shut down the road themselves and do that. So there was just kind of like a collective decision to say, you know what, let's just try to deal with it during construction. And there's some, you know, nuance to that. And I think that decision was probably right in the end, but it was a huge challenge. And I think the utilities really shaped how we had to approach construction. So staging, I'm gonna kind of gloss over this because there's a lot of detail here, but really like in a nutshell, we had to do 61 first in that kind of late 2022, and then we had to do 41 in 2023. That's the kind of long and short of it. The parking lots we had to do before, at least the goal was to get them done before, so that when we removed parking on 41, people still had a place to park downtown. That's not really how it worked out. What we actually did was much more complex. We still kind of kept to the same idea and kind of spirit of that staging plan. We pretty much kept to the same idea. We still had that kind of, the cyan was a 45-day closure for the intersection at 41 and 61 and the river bridge. The river bridge, again, was the kind of primary southern to northern route to get into the city. And again, keeping in mind that goal of, how do we maintain traffic in the city for the businesses to keep going was a major issue. The underpass was a big issue. The utilities were largely kind of shaped behind all of this. That kind of green section on the right, we had to do under traffic. And then, yeah, a lot of extra details here. Communicating this to the public, something that complex was pretty difficult. We got really creative about, how to portray this. So each of these stages has its own set duration, and we had to work with a contractor a lot about like goal setting and like how do we structure the contract to kind of hold them to all of these things while still being vague enough, yet clear enough to the public about, if we are off by a week, what are the ramifications of that? So you can kind of see on the top, there's a timeline about where those stages approximately are, and then what those stages are spatially in that map below. And there's some detail as well. So then the left side is kind of like a major overview of the whole project. We had a whole packet for this for the public. So each stage is kind of broken out. Our kind of main, if you will, stage, that kind of stage 2B, stage 4, and stage 5 is on the right here, where we still had to show like, cross traffic and all of that. Zoomed in a little bit more, you can kind of see where we had major crossings, also kind of defining no parking. So you can kind of see if we allow cars through downtown, where can they go? So cars can come up, but you have to take a right on First Street because the rest of 41 is all closed. So, and if you wanted to get all the way through, you had to use Walnut on the right. Coming south, you had to come from 61 to use Pine Street on the left. So it was a little bit confusing, but we tried to be, pretty clear about it, and people pretty well figured it out. It's a grid system. Luckily, it's not like there's any, crazy nuance about routing or anything. And then again, I was bringing this up again, like we had showed on that first slide of mine about considerations for where we could and couldn't park. So if you have that same or approximately same amount of northbound traffic from 41 now utilizing essentially a local street, we decided to kind of permit parking in some cases and then prevent it on others. And that was way more complex than it needed to be in the long run. We made pretty constant adjustments. You can kind of see those stop signs on the top. We added stop signs just to kind of, control things a little bit more. And then when we had that hard closure of 41, there's slanted parking on all of our side roads. So in order to actually use some of that parking on the side roads, you had to close 1 or 2 or maybe sometimes even 3 of those stalls. So people could like back out in the wrong direction if you've ever done that. So, maintaining that as much as possible was a primary thing. Always showing parking on this and going back. We show parking on these as well, making sure that people knew where they could go to park. We employed a kind of business/community liaison. It was essentially like on call for anything that the public needed downtown. So it's general questions about construction, it's coordination. We had water main, we had sanitary connections for all buildings downtown. So coordinating shutdowns with a contractor and him kind of bringing in the right people at the right time for the right business and or entities. We had to coordinate with owners and their tenants, since many times the owners don't communicate with their tenants very often. Garbage was another big one. Working with the garbage company about how to get all of their refuse out. Not only working with the garbage companies, but the tenants themselves for where to put all of that. Just did like general project questions, and on the bottom I have venting, which happened a lot. We had a lot of venting sessions, I think, on both sides during construction. Touching on the underpass a little bit. So I have this old rail corridor shown here. So you can see that looking east and then looking west. And looking east, there's not a lot of room to put that. For any folks with kind of structural backgrounds, there's not a lot of options for getting an underpass in here from a wall perspective and retainage behind that with the building so close. So we were pretty much forced to do either soldier piles or sheet piles or some combination of both. Sheet piles ended up being the most economical. kind of showing a graphic here of like the yellow is sheet piling. The orange is like a big 2-foot decorative head wall that we saw in those videos. And then the red is obviously the underpass itself. And folks who have managed projects before, that underpass on 41 on a trunk highway has its own kind of set, parameters that were difficult. Immediately under this, all of the soils were kind of cobbly and gross, and I don't know, it was just a mess underground. But this was the goal. I touched on vibration monitoring as well. So being this close to historic buildings was a big deal. Anytime you pound sheets, there's obviously a lot of, vibration that occurs. There's different methods of pile driving. We had pile drive, like the traditional pile hammers. We tried vibration methods of getting the sheet piles in. We had kind of specialized pile driving equipment as well, just to reduce that vibration. We looked at a hydraulic press-in method for those. We looked at everything. The sheet piling is really, really pretty hard. I have a photo on the top right about kind of that, in the middle of construction, we have much of our permanent sheets on the left and right, but then we also have temporary sheet piling to kind of bridge the gap to provide enough room for that head wall construction. Obviously, that typical section of the underpass itself, and you can kind of see the size of those head walls. So the head wall was designed not only to engage the permanent sheet piling to the box culvert itself, but to make it more decorative too. So it's pretty oversized, more than you really needed, but yeah, we'll move on. Each wall kind of had its own profile, and kind of each section here represented each kind of pile section. And each of these was kind of designed by itself, but also as a full system. I mentioned underground, there was a lot of mess and just kind of things underground. If anybody's ever pounded sheet piles before, it's a crapshoot. Whatever, you don't really know until you start getting into it what you're gonna find. Now, thinking further, a little bit more impractically from what we experience. So we're trying to manage vibration. We're trying to get all these sheets in. But say on the fourth sheet on the way on the left side, the fourth sheet hangs up at like 20 feet rather than the 60 feet. What do? Well, we didn't really know either. And we conjectured a lot with our structural engineers about like, what if this happens? Then what do we do to try to like mitigate that risk ahead of doing all of this? What if it was sheets 4, 6, and 8 all hung up at 20 feet, but all the rest of them went home? Was that sufficient enough from a structural perspective to call it good? Well, we didn't really know. So we had to just kind of get there and figure it out in real time. What if we got one wall in, but the other one had hangups? Now what? You just cut it off and leave it? Like, there's not a lot of options there. So from a risk perspective, this was pretty high up there, not only from a vibration perspective, but as far as like a fallback routine, we didn't really have any other options here. We could have done soldier piles. We looked at like a secant wall alternative. If you don't know what a secant wall is, it's kind of like a concrete wall that you drill and you backfill with concrete, just sequentially all the way down, which is cost preventative, by the way. You can kind of see that profile coming up to that trail. Maybe I'm getting a bit into the details, but I know there's a lot of nerds in the room, right? Ultimately, at the end, we only had one sheet after all 4 corners of those sheets hung up, and that one sheet hung up like 2 feet below or above where we needed it to go. So maybe we got a little bit lucky. From a vibration perspective too, if you run into a rock, that transmits a lot more vibration. So it was a thing. I think that's all my thoughts on this one. We added pilasters to kind of decorate the thing and lighting and all that stuff too. Turned out pretty sweet in the end, but a lot of stress getting there, I guess. I would recommend using it. We're going to be done with that trail probably this summer, so that'll be nice. Again, like Jake said, this is like one of the first lane diets in the metro. There was a lot of skepticism, even amongst the public. We got a lot of comments from through our community liaison that was kind of like, this isn't going to work. And we had a lot of outreach ahead of time and to kind of gather those opinions. But to the folks I was sitting with, letting your numbers kind of speak for you ended up being correct. So good work, traffic engineers. Our construction was pretty close to what we were projecting, and despite all of the challenges, we finished on time and right around the budget. We had a cute little ribbon cutting. This is one of those, I don't know, I'm not a big accolades guy, but this was a big deal for the community. And there was a lot of detractors through construction that are in that crowd today, we're all happy that it's finally done. So in the end, everybody was pretty happy. That's what I got. How are we doing on time? Okay, no questions then. Sounds good.
I'll just say thank you to our speakers for sharing and to our sponsor Stonebrook. And that's all we've got for today. So thanks for coming. It's good to see all of you.
I don't know how to turn that off.
Hold it. There we go.
You want to get that?
Yeah.
Yes. You're good.
Speaker gets up on the table if you can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.